Shalom. In Yerushalayim, we will be celebrating Purim on Monday, which means Sunday night. We will read the Megillah Sunday night, whereas the rest of Israel, in Tel Aviv and all the other cities, they will be reading, most of the cities, they will be reading, as well as the whole world, they will be reading on Saturday night, they will have to read the Megillah, and then on Sunday, Purim. Okay, but right now we are on Erev Shabbat, because today it's Thursday, and tomorrow night is Shabbat. And this Shabbat we will be reading the parasha, of course, Parashat Vayikra, but at the same time also the second Sefer Torah will be, we will read Parashat Zachor. It's only a matter of 3 verses, and yet it's a very serious mitzvah, it's a commandment of the Torah that we should read every year this portion of the Torah which tells us about Amalek. Everybody knows that Amalek is, of course, the eternal enemy of the Jewish people. And we will be explaining later what does it mean. But we know that in the very beginning, when we encountered Amalek in the Torah, that was after the Jewish people were liberated from Egypt, from Mitzrayim, and a great redemption. After all the great miracles that happened then. And then when the whole world heard about it, and as the Torah says, Sham'u ami mirgazun, chil achaz yoshve pelashet, great fear seized the heart of all the nations when they heard what the Almighty God did to the Jewish people to redeem them. Not even one enemy. The whole world were not supposed to become great lovers of the Jewish people, but nevertheless, no one of them thought that you could come and fight against them because God Himself is with them. And yet there was an exception. Amalek. Amalek came and he wanted to attack the Jewish people. At that time, of course, the Jewish people were still, they had a few weaklings who were not very much into spirituality, and old people, and he attacked, and Amalek came to attack them. And that's when we see that Moses, on the top of the mountain, started to pray to the Almighty God. And there is much to say about this, but he prayed. At the same time, Joshua, was leading the battle against Amalek. And then it says, Vayachalosh Yehoshua et Amalek ve'et amo lefi charev. Conclusion, after a very hard kind of battle, in which many, Jews also were affected, because the Torah says that when Moses raised his hands, he was very old, he could not keep his hands in the direction of heaven all the time. So when he succeeded to have them high, the Jewish people were afflicting their enemy Amalek with a great hand, and therefore they were winning. But sometimes Moses had to bring down his arms, and that's when Amalek had of course, was able to affect the Jewish people, to to cause them several casualties, I guess. And since then, the Torah tells us one of the 613 commandments, Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek. What does it mean? Remember what Amalek has done unto you. And according to the explanation of our sages as brought in the Gemara, apparently he was completely defeated by Joshua. Nevertheless, Amalek has definitely created a new atmosphere vis-a-vis the Jewish people. If they were not to be attacked by Amalek, perhaps up to today the Jewish people would never be hated, or at least not to be attacked by the nations. But since Amalek did it, he ruined that atmosphere, he ruined that feeling, and the nation saw that it's possible, if we want to, you could attack the Jewish people, and it's possible to even cause them casualties, and in many ways, right? So far, throughout all the generations, the nations were not very amicable with us. They were not the best friends. We have suffered very much, but we are still existing as we are supposed to be, the eternal people. But the nations have succeeded to make us suffer. And that started from this attack of Amalek. That's why we are not supposed to forget the terrible thing that he caused us. The fact that because of him, probably now, that's why the Jewish people have suffered throughout the generations. Why? Because it's possible to attack the Jewish people. It's possible to make them suffer, even if you don't succeed to eliminate them completely, but still you can make them suffer. Nevertheless, there was an exception. Many years later on, in the time of Ahasuerus, when he was the king of 127 countries in the world, practically the whole world, and Ahasuerus was a king, was not very smart, but he succeeded to become the king of all the nations at that time. The Jewish people at that time were after the destruction of the first temple, so they were at that time in Persia. Most of the Jewish people were in Persia, Iran today. But there was an enemy there. The Jews did not attract, as usual, did not attract much admiration or much love. The Jewish people knew that they were always, there was always a distance between the Jewish people and the other nations. Nevertheless, the Jews, little by little, they forget, they prefer the easy life, and they mingle with the nations with whom they are, and to a certain degree they forget who they are, and they forget the Almighty God. And what happened? So we all know what happened. Again, a decree of extermination has been decreed upon them in heaven. And Haman, the great enemy of the Jewish people, a scion of Amalek, is now on the surface, bringing his hatred, his terrible enmity that he has in his heart against the Jews, and he decides to persuade the king to go along with him and to go and practically destroy the Jewish people. In all the nations, since practically the whole world was under Ahasuerus, it means wherever they go in the world, he will have the authorization to kill the Jews. So he went, and Haman went to Achashverosh, and he opted and he said to him, Yeshno am echad, mefuzar umforad ben ha'amim, bechol medinot malchutecha, vedatehem shonot milkol am. There is a nation among us, but it is a nation that is different than all the nations. They don't like our religion, they do their own religion, and they don't recognize ours. What is this? So he's trying to influence the king, who was not very smart. So he got the authorization from the king himself by receiving the ring from the personal ring of the king, and go ahead. And they decided that in a year exactly, on the month of Adar, he will be able to go with his army and destroy, God forbid, the Jewish people. This decree of extermination came from heaven. We find in the Bible that 2 times God wanted to practically destroy the Jewish people. The first time happened when they were waiting for Moses to come down from Sinai to bring the Torah. That's when the people who joined the Jewish people, whom we call the Erev Rav, those people who were not Jewish, they were not born Jewish, but they were slaves. They were enslaved in Egypt. When the occasion presented itself and redemption came upon the Jewish people after so many miracles, and then for the first time the Jews were able to leave Egypt, those slaves, by their hundreds of thousands of people, joined the Jewish people, and Moses accepted them, thinking that he is going to convert them, and this way the nation of Israel will be very, very big. That was the mistake of Moses. Our sages say that God was not pleased with that, but he did not stop Moses from doing it. And unfortunately, those people were idol worshippers. But then the Jews also were idol worshippers at that time, but they still had, there's no question about it, that they were the great-great-grandchildren of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So if there was any idol worshipping among them, it's only because they were enslaved many years in Egypt, the land of idol worshipping. Once they were under the leadership of Moshe, then the real Jews definitely went along with him to be able to receive the Torah at the mountain of Sinai and to recognize definitely the fact that God is the only God and no other one is God. As we say, Shema Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Listen, O Israel, God is our God, and He is one. His unity is not questionable at all. But the Erev Rav, the people who joined with the Jewish people, they had a different heart. When they saw that Moses is late, apparently according to their calculations, so they started to foment a sort of revolution, a kind of revolution. Well, what can we say? Unfortunately, even though the real Jews were more numerous than those people who joined the Erev Rav, but they did not have the courage against the chutzpah of the Erev Rav to go against them completely. And that's when the golden calf appeared through some magic that came from those people, and that was the problem. And then that's what we call the Egel HaZahav, the great sin of the golden calf. One minute, please. Forgive me, my friends.